Welcome back to Joe Stunner Boxing. Anthony Yarde and Frank Warren, they seem to have made up. And now, according to Frank anyway, Anthony's going to appear on a Queensbury show. They were sitting next to each other at last night's Derek Chisora Otto Wallin fight. I watched an interview with Frank and Anthony standing next to each other. This was on Box Nation. By the way, before I go any further, I just want to tell you a little aside here. I'm going to go off at a tangent here because this made me chuckle. At one point in the interview, Frank someone barged into him behind him and he looked over his shoulder as if to say, what's going on? Mind how you go. Who was it who bumped into him? Gareth A. Davies. Who else would it be? Good old Gareth, elbowing his way in. Anyway, that's just made me laugh. Good old Gareth. I love Gareth, yeah. The comedy gift that keeps on giving. Anyway, Frank said that him and Anthony Yarde, and I presume Anthony Yarde's representatives, that would be Tunde and a few others maybe, they've had 3 or 4 meetings and they thrashed it out, and Anthony Yarde will appear on a Queensbury show. Now, before then, Yarde has a fight with Lyndon Arthur, a third fight, which no one was really keen on. No one's keen on that fight at all. No one asked for it. And when it was announced, everyone thought, what? I mean, Lyndon Arthur has fought Bivol for the world title, lost every round, went the distance, got floored, but at least he went the distance. What would you call... I would call Lyndon Arthur a sort of European-level fighter. And I made a video about Anthony Yarde saying, why do people think he's world-class? What has he done to prove he's world-class? He gave 2 very good losing by stoppage, by KO fights against a shot-born Kovalev and then Beterbiev, which, okay, you gave him good fights, but he still lost them. But apart from that, has he ever beaten a world-class fighter? No. In fact, I'm struggling. Apart from beating Lyndon Arthur, I'm struggling to think of any European-level fighters he's beaten. But they're still thinking of the Buatsi fight being a possibility, I think. And don't forget, Frank has got other light heavies in the mix, and also he's in with Eddie Hearn, who's got some light heavies. Buatsi fights Callum Smith on that gigantic February 22nd card. Frank's got Willie Hutchinson. He's got Zach Parker, who didn't look good at all on the undercard of the Chisora Wallin fight. I wonder if that's a possibility. Frank must be thinking, okay, Zach, it's about time you piss or get off the pot now. I'll put you in against one of my other light heavies, because he was going to fight Willie Hutchinson, was he? Willie Hutchinson is worth hanging on to if I was a promoter, because although he lost to Buatsi, he did beat Spider Richards, and he's the kind of guy who he will give it all, and he's in there. He's that kind of guy. I mean, if you want to compare him to, say, a Chisora type, who will let it all hang out and he won't always win, but he's a good, tough pro who will give you value for money, and as a promoter that you're going to get maximum effort out of him. He's not going to slack. But this return to the fold for the prodigal son, Anthony Yarde. I mean, when they were being interviewed, Yarde said, I've always called him Uncle Frank. He's like my uncle. He was like a father figure to me. And it's weird, but there are very few times over not just the years, but the decades, when I've ever seen Frank Warren, when he's interviewed, almost upset about something, like a fighter. I don't mean upset because someone's ripped him off or whatever, but just disappointed, And I got the impression when he talked about Anthony Yarde, because they would go to Arsenal matches together and sit next to each other because they're both Arsenal fans. And it was almost like, what did I do wrong? I didn't do wrong. I got him 2 world title fights, and the guy's punking me. And this isn't right, and I'm so disappointed because he seems to genuinely like Anthony Yarde, it's almost like a sort of father and son thing. I mean, I'm reluctant to say this about any promoter because we know what promoters can be like, but there did seem to be a genuine friendship there, a genuine respect there at the very least. And I haven't seen Frank react like that many occasions in the past. I remember him being interviewed a couple of times about a guy called Tony Collins, who was a very talented guy back in the 80s. And his brother George was pretty good as well, George Collins. And Tony Collins just didn't live the life. And Frank said, you know, he had so much talent and he just threw it away. Would not live the life. But as we know, talent's not the only thing that makes a good fighter. And more recently, I suppose the last 10 years, Mitchell Smith would be another one who had a lot of promise, and Frank was promoting him and it didn't come together. Mitchell Smith, I think he ended up in prison and, you know, wasted his career, basically, wasted the best years of his career doing nothing. So the fact that him and Frank Warren and Yarde are now, you know, seemingly, at the very least, having a working relationship again, I think is really good. And of course, it may be good for Frank Warren, but my God, it's good for Anthony Yarde, because Christ almighty, I mean, I'm not the only one that's made videos about how this guy's fucked his career up. Or should I say maybe him and Tunde Ajayi have fucked his career up. You know, bypassing the opportunity to be on Riyadh cards, which are worth, you know, in potentially millions to a fighter if they string a couple of wins together. You know, you're well paid on those bills. Even if you're down the bill, you're well paid. And talk about opportunities. And don't forget, Yarde is in his mid-30s now. And he did start late. Okay, so there aren't a lot of miles on the clock, but that's not really the point. I mean, he's a very naturally athletic guy. But when you get to your mid-30s, if you are relying on athleticism rather than, you know, necessarily boxing technique and having it, you know, drilled into you and being such a well-schooled fighter from a young age, if it's the case of athleticism is your main attribute, when you get into your mid-30s, it does start to wane a little bit. So this is perhaps this is an Indian summer for Anthony Yarde, and he can string a couple of good wins together against world-class opponents, because if he wants to get on those Riyadh cards, he's got to face good men. Otherwise, forget about it. The excellent Turkey's not interested. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Probably get the Lyndon Arthur fight out of the way. You would assume Yarde would win that, but not a foregone conclusion. I wouldn't say it was more than 60-40, 65-35 in favour of Yarde. And a lot of that, I weight it in Yarde's favour because of the mental stuff, because of the emotional stuff, the psychological stuff, the fact that the last time they fought, Lyndon Arthur wasn't at the races and got stopped in 4 rounds. And the first fight was very, very close, you know, and Arthur edged it. But you could make a case for Yarde winning that. And it could be that Yarde is 2-0 up against him. Arthur's got to prove otherwise. Arthur's going to have to show a lot of grit, a lot of determination, be it at his optimum game, and, you know, really bring it. But we'll see. We'll see. And don't forget, Yarde is a very, very big light heavyweight. Very big. I thought by this point of his career he'd end up at cruiser, but apparently not. All right. Well, those are my thoughts. Please leave yours below in the comments section and subscribe to the channel if you're new, and hit the like button and spread the word about Joe Standard Boxing, because it's such a wonderful channel. Don't you agree? No. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks very much. Bye for now.